Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Lawn Care CEO podcast. My name is Dan Ralston, the head coach here at the Lawn Care CEO. Joining me today, special guest, Brent Moore, Outdoor Living SC. I'm very excited to introduce this guest, and I'll have him introduce himself more in a minute. But the reason I'm excited is because he is one of the, do you remember the old commercials, Brent? The commercial that was like, where it was the Dos Equis commercial where it's like, the most interesting man in the world. And it's like, I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I drink Dos Equis. And it was like about this very fascinating, I feel, Brent, like you might be the most, you may be the most interesting man in lawn care to me. Is that too flattering?
No, I mean, I'll take the title, most interesting.
The most interesting man in lawn care.
It doesn't necessarily say good or bad. It just says interesting.
No, just interesting. Oh yeah. And that probably, it's probably fair as well. And we've known each other for a bit, just to give the audience some context. We probably met 3 years ago, two and a half, three, something like that. Mm-hmm. All right. So Brent, I won't spoil too much of the ending here, other than to say you're a very successful commercial lawn care business owner in the Southeast, in a town called Valdosta, Georgia, which the one time I went there, it was snowing. So Brent, introduce yourself this way. So I'm going to ask you kind of, the memes that are like how it started, how it's going. Tell us where it started, and then kind of tell us how it's going.
So, 14 years ago, I decided to just go out on my own and start a pool company is actually how it started. And I was cleaning swimming pools at the time, and I was just like, I want to do my own thing. Wasn't very employable. Real quick, long story short is I had a past background of drugs and alcohol, and actually wasn't a very employable person. So it affected me being able to get a job at, your bigger jobs, that are paying decent money. So I was like, I'm going to go out on my own and just pursue this pool cleaning thing. I always knew early on I wanted to be a business owner, just didn't know what.
So part of this is, to me, interesting because I didn't know this about you. So you were having a hard time getting jobs because at this point you're clean at this point.
Yeah, I was sober. I just sobered up. I probably was, I sobered up a week after I decided to start my own thing.
Is this a new sobering technique? Like, become sober by becoming an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So I'd been trying to, clean up. My drug of choice was cocaine and alcohol were my two favorites. And so I pretty much quit doing cocaine for a couple of weeks, maybe. But I was still struggling with the alcohol. And so I was like, I've got to just change scenery of everything that I'm doing. And I was like, I'm going to start my own business, just like any drug addict would want to do. And so I started my own business, and I had a doctor. He's still a dear friend of mine. He helped me out and was like, hey, just come work for me by the hour. Whenever you can work and do your own thing. And so that's what I've done. And so then he had 35 acres that I maintained for him and fixed everything, whatever. And so then I decided one of my roommates' mom needed one of her rental properties cut. And so I asked the doc, I was like, can I borrow your lawnmower and go cut this property? He said, sure. And so then I started cutting a couple yards on the side, and then fast forward to.
And this is like what, 2011, somewhere in there?
2011. Yep. And so fast forward to now, we have 10 lawn maintenance crews, and hit a little over right at 5 million in the last 12 months. And so it's just grown.
Do you think this is like, I don't know, I'm kind of curious by this. So forgive me if this is too personal, but like, I'm super curious because I do think there are some overlaps between addictive personalities and successful entrepreneurs.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't argue that at all. We, as somebody who has an addictive personality with everything that I do, it's like you have to be bought in and all into anything that you want to do to succeed in.
Yeah. Because I think I have a bit of an addictive personality. I've never had a problem with drugs or alcohol because of my faith. Just kind of kept me from that a little bit. But my mom would always warn me. She's like, Grandpa was an alcoholic. Don't drink. Like, she was like, it affected her life so much that she scared me off of it. But But I do think that there's something about this kind of like little bit of an obsessive, like driving, like all in person. Cause I'm in that same way, all in or all out. Right.
Yep.
And yeah, so like those of us who've had that, have that in us a little bit, there's something great about it in some ways.
Yeah, because it translates into every area of our life with that addictive personality. So I was huge into CrossFit back in 2017. I started
Hmm.
doing CrossFit, and I mean, I was at the gym 10 to 12 hours a week, training hard up until the last probably 2 years, 3 years. I've backed off of it, but that addictive personality fed that, and it
All in.
just, yeah, it was just like I'm all into this. I mean, I was, counting every gram of rice that I'd make, and I didn't eat nothing that wasn't, good quality food. I mean, it was a, an all in experience. And then whenever I fell out of it, because I'm not all in, it's so much harder for me to do it. And so
Mm,
now, I'm lucky to train 4 to 5 hours a week now. And it's just I have to make myself go. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that the addictive personality definitely correlates with, success,
hmm.
and with everything that we do. It's my faith, my business, my health, my
Yeah.
family. You just have to be bought in.
Yeah. Well,
But that's kind of who I am. Where we got started. I actually sold my pool business though last year, so I'm no longer cleaning swimming pools, and that's
and you were pretty happy about that too, right? If I
super
remember right.
happy. Yeah, super happy, and I could focus my energy on commercial lawn maintenance. So
So right now I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying it's like 95% commercial. Everything else is
yep,
secondary.
I'd say about 85 to 90.
Yeah.
Commercial.
A little bit of residential here and there.
Yep. Yeah, we still do residential. We have a few residential accounts left, and do Christmas lighting. So we do a decent amount of
Yeah.
residential Christmas lighting and some irrigation work for those residential customers. So
So we were talking a little bit just before we started that I think there's a little bit of a brand around commercial that's kind of like the residential guys stick their nose up just a tiny bit to say, well, residential is more profitable, it's more scalable, it's easier to go. So defend commercial as your choice of saying, hey, because you had the option, you were kind of in between at some point, weren't you? And you
oh
said, no,
yeah,
we're going to go commercial.
at one point, yeah. Well, I started residential. I mean, as a lot of people know, it is a little bit harder to get into the commercial sector, especially if you want large commercial.
Yeah.
Um, because you have to have all the insurances, and then like all the stuff we got several big projects that we're bidding on right now. They're asking for references of $200,000 plus contracts, so the
Mm,
average guy can't go do that. We have a couple
yeah.
handful of contracts that are more than $200,000, and so it's easier for us to bid on those. But uh, to those people, I say, good, you stay in residential, then I'll keep
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great. Yeah, it's
yeah.
terrible over here. Like this is no good. We don't like it over here. It's
Yeah,
terrible.
so I look at it from a scalability point of, you know, when you look at a big commercial property, you can send a crew there, and and they can learn quickly. If I teach you how to, would you say run an edge,
Mm,
I can put you on one of our properties, and you can spend 6 hours edging in one day. To whereas if you're doing residentials, the most you're going to ever edge in a day is 2 hours, 3 hours maybe. And so it's going to take a little bit longer to train somebody on certain things, one, but then B, from a management standpoint, it's so much easier on me. I could tell you I've had 3 meetings with one of my residential customers in the last 6 months. I just went and had one meeting with a customer that
right.
spends over $600,000 with me a year this morning. First time.
Not like 20 Karens a day saying, "Hey, you
Yeah,
forgot to pull a weed."
that's right. A lot of people say there's a lot of risk in it when you get into the larger commercial, because what if that contract quits?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
here's the um, gosh, what's the T-Mobile guy? Richard Branson. He said, one of his questions, quotes that he said is, what would happen if we invest in our employees and they leave us? And he
Mm,
responds, what happens if we invest in them and they don't? And so that's the way I feel about my commercial accounts. Is I'm not going to worry about if they leave us. I'm looking at, well, what if they stay with us? And we generally, our larger ones, we continue to keep. just because we offer a level of customer service to those people that you can't offer
Yeah.
3,000 residential accounts.
It feels like the bigger you get, the flywheel kind of spins a little faster. The accounts come maybe a little easier because you said, hey, we're
Yeah.
known, we're experienced. What would your advice be to the guy that's kind of trying to break into the commercial world early days? Tell us about your experience breaking in to commercial. Like, what was your first big account that you're like, oh, dude, it's for real now?
Yeah, so our first big account would have been like our hospital contract that we have here, and we still have it. We got it in 2014, and I always tell people I built my business, just being in the right place, at the right time, and through the majority of my contracts, I can honestly say this: I could put back to 90% of my probably contracts to these two things. One of them being church, or another one being CrossFit. Like that's just where I developed my relationships with.
New marketing strategy: get
Yeah,
religious and get fit. That's the
that's
new
right.
marketing strategy.
So, and that was because those are my communities. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where my face is. We were heavily involved in our gym. Serving in our gym. My wife was a CrossFit coach there, and so like people knew us. I'm a pretty outgoing guy, so I got to be able to meet people and know people, and then through our church, serving in the church. I served in different departments in the church: worship team, setup team, baptism team.
And you weren't doing those things to get business. You were
No,
just doing those things
yeah.
because that's what your passion was
That's right.
at the
That's
time.
right. And so through
Hmm.
connections, I actually got backdoored into the hospital contract where,
Hmm.
where it was, hey, we need you to come fix this at the hospital. We need you to come do this. And then after doing some side stuff for the hospital, because their contractor they had wouldn't fulfill the obligations, they called me in. I found out I was pregnant on July 31st. My wife was pregnant.
I was going to say your wife was pregnant, because
And
if
then
we found out you were pregnant, this would be a bit. This podcast is going to take a totally different direction.
Yeah, I think it was July 31st or 30th. It was the last day of July, I think. And then the next morning I woke up and I got a phone call from hospital, said, we need you in my office. And I'm like, oh gosh, what? And so I walk in there like, hey, we need you to bid on all the hospital properties and take over this contract.
Holy. How much was that contract worth at the time?
It's $150,000 maybe. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a lot then. They've added on. I mean, we've got 3 times the amount of properties now because they've just keep
Yeah.
buying a lot of real estate. And
But at the time, when you're coming from residential, $150,000 contract probably
it's more than
was
50%
was
of my
eye
lawn.
popping,
Yeah, it was
eye
50%
popping.
of my lawn maintenance revenue. And so,
So this is something, Brad, that I'm learning about you. Uh, Talk about risk tolerance, because there's a moment where you probably are looking at, like, because that's probably one of the scary things to me. If I'm sitting across that table and I'm going, okay, so at the stroke of the pen, we double our maintenance division, and then we got to go solve all the problems that are connected to that. Um, like, you just had this happen in Tallahassee where it's like, hey, we just landed a new big contract, and all of a sudden in a new location, new business. Like, talk about like how does this crazy work where you're like willing to go do that?
yeah, so I think, uh, so Dan and I work together with coaching and love working with Dan with coaching and all. And so he's met my leadership team, and one of the guys on my leadership team is Tommy. And so this morning in our call, we've just landed this $340,000 contract in an hour and a half away from where we live, where we don't have a branch currently, and they want us to start next week. And we just
Yeah.
found this out yesterday. And so I'm just like, all right, let's go.
Yeah,
And
great news. What
Tommy
possibly could go wrong?
here like quiet in our meeting this morning. So Dan looks at him and goes, "So Tommy, how does this make you feel?" And so like God designs different people different ways to be able to handle challenges in different ways, and I
Yeah.
firmly believe that and know that, and so, but then God also puts people in my life like Tommy to go slow down,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
hey Brent, what are we going to do? And I'm like, I don't know, we're going to figure it out though. We're just going to go. And he's like, no, we need to talk. Like, we need to figure this out. So it's like, okay.
Have you ever gotten burned on that end where you're like, I bit off more than I can chew and it really hurt? Or has it kind of always worked out?
it's always worked out. Now, there's a lot of times where stress kind of takes over, and I feed off. I'm an adrenaline junkie, man. So it's like
Mm,
whenever a challenge comes my way, I'm either going to shut down completely or I'm gonna hit it head on. And sometimes I hit it head on and then I shut down, and then I get
yeah.
back up and I hit it head on again. But uh, so most of the time, I mean, it's I've never had one where it's just like, dang it, we're really screwed, and like this is going to affect us. It's going to hurt our
Yeah.
bottom line. The Lord just always protected me from that, I guess, and or I know that. But I think also just
But
having the
you've lived on the edge of chaos a bit, and
whole
almost
life.
it's and almost like my whole life has been on the edge of
Yeah,
chaos. But and
yeah,
you thrive there on
that's
that
right.
edge, right? Like where it's
When I don't
like,
have something going on, I get bored, and I don't want to be bored.
and this is kind of back to that original thought where it's like this part of this kind of obsessive, addictive personality where it's like, man, I like need that. I need something fueling my energy. I knew a guy once who, um, he was just kind of crazy, and I don't think you're maybe as crazy as he was, but he was like told me stories one day where he was like, yeah, my wife and I decided we were bored one night, and so we decided to go streaking through our neighborhood.
Yeah,
And
we're not.
I was like a married couple. Like he was just like, yeah, we were bored, and we're like, let's go streaking. And it was like, he later would tell me, he's like, I went to a therapist after he was divorced and after a lot of bad things happened because he just had this problem. He said, I learned that I just don't have the same like wiring as people as far as like my willingness to be embarrassed or be shy about things, and I had to kind of work on that. But my point is that, man, there are some personality types where it really is like, I want to be on that edge of chaos. And the truth is that growth typically happens in that same environment. Like when you're in CrossFit, what's the goal? To get to the edge without breaking, right? It's
That's
like
right.
to live in that space.
You tear all the muscles down as much as you possibly can without damaging them to the point of no repair, and then they rebuild themselves. And you keep doing that over and over again, and it just builds. And it's how muscles are made.
So how do you think about that? Is there a point where it's like, man, I've been lucky enough, like I've brushed with death enough. It's time for me to slow down and be more conservative, be more safe.
Yeah.
Or
So
is there some other check that you're putting in place in your mind where it's like, okay,
yeah, I mean, honestly, the only check that I have in place for that is you and Tommy. And so
but
like,
those are important checks, right? And
that's right.
probably a wife, right, on the personal side,
Yeah.
where it's
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
I
She
have people
now
in my orbit that are going to keep me kind of within acceptable boundaries.
Yeah, she won't let me get to the point where she's just like, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Like, no, you don't need to even go bid on those. But whenever it comes to like the work stuff, and she's not as involved, it's more of, you know, definitely like if she sees it, she warns me before I go to do something. And just like our Tallahassee and our Gainesville and Warner Robins branch, we've been talking about these for 3 years. And last year we put it down on paper. I think the year before last we put it down on paper, and then the beginning of last year, she actually in one of our leadership meetings was like, "Hold on, no, we're not doing it." And she's like, so then she got a couple of our other leadership team on board with her. And all of a sudden they all tag team me, and it's like, Brent, we're outvoting you. And I'm like, hey, I respect that. And so,
Is that why she's no longer is involved in the business? You kind of worked her out so you can.
no, she's like, I don't want to have to keep telling you no. So she, no,
Well,
her
and
season
something.
definitely was very beneficial.
Yeah. Like one of the things that I think about here is, I so let me get to more kind of concrete, practical advice here. So I feel like one of the risks, if somebody doesn't know what they're doing in commercial, they can get really, really burned
Oh yeah,
because they're going to get committed to a contract that is going to be way underbid. Like in residential, you'll miss by $50. In commercial, you might miss by $50,000. Like you
hmm
can really, really miss. What like talk through just briefly your process for going, all right, I'm going to know how to bid this correctly and make sure I don't miss big on that $340,000 contract, right?
Yeah.
Like those are big swings, and probably the nightmare stories we've heard from people who really did get burned in commercial were just started the very first contract and they missed there, and then everything else was screwed.
Yeah. So we were very fortunate with the hospital contract because the way it actually worked is they had a budget already established for it, and they were having to fire their vendor that they had.
Okay.
Um, and so they pretty much told me like, hey, we need you to come in and get these properties right. And then I think it was 6 months they gave me and then I gave them a proposal. So I was fortunate enough to know what it took to do the
Oh,
properties before I gave them their price. Now, fast forward years later when I had to rebid it, I then had data to rebid it and actually
okay.
adjust my prices. So because I knew that I was going to be bidding it, I actually had to bid it, as if somebody was bidding against me. And so I had some of my properties, I had learned how to do them more efficiently, and I was, we'll just use a random number. I was making $100 an hour on. Well, I'm not going to bid it at $100 an hour because I'm going to lose that contract. You just
Yeah.
bid commercial stuff that high, and so I had to adjust those down. And some of them where I was not making any money on, I had to adjust those up. So I had that data to actually make those adjustments after there. So that's a, but that's a, I mean,
That's a
that
unique
type of
experience,
walking
right?
into that contract is completely unique. But what we learned to do and I've talked with, different coaches, consultants, and people I respect and trust in the industry, and it's, one of the big things that everybody always says, know your numbers, right? And I think that you would preach that any day of the week.
100%.
And we honestly don't have a bulletproof system of knowing our numbers on bidding a property. So how we do it is, like a lot of people want to go measure square footage and say, all right, I'm going to charge, we can mow 2.62 acres per hour, with this mower and hedge, 5,000 feet in every 27 minutes, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, every property is going to be different, so you can't use that math on every single property. So what
It's
we
much.
do is we base a property based off of a very similar size property, and then we look at it and go, okay, this is a 7.5 acre doctor's office, and we have this doctor's office over here that's 7.5 acre, and it's 8.5 acres. This one's got a little bit less turf. This one's got a little bit more turf. We know we can mow faster over here, so we're going to kind of look at those and compare our budgeted hours that we have on this other property, and that's how we generally bid it. A smaller commercial, a little gas station style, property, we know like it's going to be, a 2.5 man hour job.
So
It doesn't
you're
matter.
basing a little. It's a little bit art, a little bit science. It's like I'm looking
Yeah.
at comparable numbers, looking at comparable property, like kind of like it's almost like a real estate agent a little bit,
Yeah.
where they're pulling three comps. They're looking at those three comps
That's
and
right.
saying, based on those three comps, we're going to land it somewhere in this range as far as the value of the property.
Yep.
Um,
And then you also look at it.
that's interesting.
You have to put into calculation too is, does this person want to spend money? Like,
Mm,
like we have one contract. It's a gas station contract here, and you look at, a lot of people think of a gas station of like, there's a gas station. And, but we look at it and we go, we bid on one of their properties and they want us to bid on another one. And he literally said to me, whenever we got done bidding on it, and we started the property, I called him, hey man, just want to thank you for your opportunity. Blah, blah. My name's Brent. I'm the owner. If your account manager can't ever take care of you, something like that, you give me a call, whatever. And he's like, yeah, he's like, whatever you see that needs fixed, send me a quote and fix it. Whatever you see needs fixed, fix it.
literally said, please,
Like,
please let me give you money.
yep. And then yesterday, funny story, this guy shows up to a property yesterday. We hadn't been there in a week, because we service once a week. And he sends videos complaining about the trash. And we had a bad hurricane here 6 months ago now, 7 months ago. There's still a couple of trees leaning and some stuff done. And he's like angry that like there's trash on the ground, which that was understandable, but it wasn't our fault. It'd been a week. But then he was like, and there's trees leaned over and nobody's told me, like, fix it, fix it. And it's like the dude's got a checkbook, ready to write,
That is
whatever.
by the way, that is such a great example of how easy upsells can be.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't we alert every homeowner, every commercial owner, hey, dude, there's a problem. I'm an expert. Like, if you walked into your doctor and you had a toenail fungus, like, if the doctor wouldn't look at it and be like, I don't want to talk, I don't want to bring it up. It'd be like, no, it's your obligation to tell me there's something wrong. And then I can decide whether or not I spend money on it. But yeah, I love that. And so
when you're doing,
but one of your factors is kind of the real estate example would be like, is it in a really nice neighborhood where they're going to be spending some money?
Yeah. And when you're doing your site audit with the customer in the beginning, they're going to say, you're going to look at something and be like, man, those bushes like are all dead over there. And if they say something along the lines of, yeah, it's just, it's just how it is. But if they're like, I know we've been trying to get our previous contractor to fix it, but we can't ever get them to answer the phone, whatever it may be. Then you go, your mind automatically clicks. All right, this is going to be an enhancement opportunity that I can bill out at, a 55, 60% margin. And so you're going to be a little bit more apt to probably bid it under your lower man hour rate for your maintenance, because you're going to keep that customer because you can deliver the customer service. They're going to stay on board with you. You're going to, it's a 5 man hour property. After 6 months, your crew's going to be able to do it in 4 man hours. So you've already cut 20% out, and so, or 20% more profitable. And so you start factoring all those things in when you're doing the bid, and but the upsells is where we make the most of our money at with all of our contracts. And
interesting.
That's where,
because once you're already kind of in,
they're not bidding out.
Yeah,
they're not calling another company to, hey, I wanted to change out these 10 bushes. I need to resod this side of the building. And then the other thing is, it's not their money. When you're dealing with a residential customer, it is their personal money that they're spending, and they're going to hold on to that much tighter than when you're dealing with the director of facilities at a $10 million facility.
Yeah, it's a line item for them.
Yep. It's like, hey, I can spend up to $2,500 without getting permission. Just do it.
Yep.
Or,
and by the way, way more recession proof a little bit, I think, right? Because these guys are going to have, like, whether it's HOA or a hospital, they have to maintain their grounds no matter what the economy does.
Yeah, we haven't seen, even with the way the economy has been, going, everybody's freaking out over the last, 12 to 18 months. We didn't see nothing with our commercial accounts.
So I'm just like, I want to put a fine pin on this. So, I mean, do you miss very often on bidding accounts?
So that's the other good thing too is on a commercial is if you do miss on a 20 plus man hour property, you can generally find ways to, because you're not going to miss by 10 man hours on a 20 man hour property. You're going to miss by 3 to 5 man hours.
Yeah.
One way or the other. And so you got to suck it up and try to sell some enhancements to make up the difference. Okay. Or you've got to get creative and like, all right, we got to really figure out a way we can cut this to where we don't have to cut this hidden section back here. We can cut it every, 10 minutes.
So you're kind of like, all right, we missed on our initial bid. Yep. There's some ways we might be able to flex a little bit to still give a quality product, but not to really have to spend as many hours.
Yep. And that's like, I mean, you rarely ever want to do that, but
yeah. Okay.
On your large commercials that you got to go, because see, what we do is some of our larger commercials, we have to go twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can only do half the property before the parking lots fill up or before it gets too busy, and then we come back and do the other half of it. So as for scheduling purposes, it makes it easier. There's a few properties we do that with, and so we're able to figure out the different ways to maneuver the man hours in a way that we can hit this Monday this week, and then we don't hit it again till Wednesday next week.
Yeah.
Because
and by the way, like, hopefully I'm okay to share this. Like, to give you an idea, guys, like you told me before the call, like 20% profit margin over the last net profit over the last 12 months.
Yeah.
Like, so this is not like we're skating by with volume and getting a little margin, hopefully, out of the and because we have enough volume, there's a little margin at the end. It's like, no, this is legit, solid, healthy business. And you're winning big contracts that way, and you're winning through adding these enhancements pieces on the other side. And so it's no like, and hopefully there's less, like, probably when the concerns come in, they're bigger. Or no, is there more drama on commercial when there's drama, or is it actually less drama?
No, no, because one of the things that we, with our, especially our commercial accounts, our bigger ones especially, we give them direct access to our account managers, and then my large ones have my cell phone number, and then also we have office phone, and so when there's an issue, generally speaking, that director of the facilities or whoever our direct contact is, whenever like a doctor brings it up to them or somebody else on the staff at one of these businesses, they immediately call, and all they have to say is, CEO just walked by and he's pissed that there's a weed over here. And within 4 hours, somebody's there to take care of it. And so it never gets
And probably one of the reasons it's magical for you, why you
that's
retain
right.
so well, is
Yeah.
that you are there within 4 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's never like this, it never gets to that point because
Mm.
they know that like we're going to take care of them,
Yeah.
that it's, we're going to be there. Now it's
Because that's
scary.
kind of, because
Whenever those things
a
come
lot of times, by the way, when you're dealing with commercial guys, they kind of know, they kind of get the business side of this. They're like, just take care of us, we're good. Like, they're almost a little more understanding than residential, because that doesn't understand business might
that's
be.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And we just, like we had a local technical college here that we have a contract with, and I had sent a crew out there that was just doing a terrible job, and we implemented a night shift crew, which I can go into that too. And they were doing this technical college at night. Well, we weren't managing them very well and inspecting behind them, and the property got out of hand within a month, really bad. And the lady called me, who's my boss, and I was like, "Hey," and she was furious. And I just like I this was the third different time that she's had an issue with us, and this is few and far between that we ever have an account that we've had an issue this bad with. And I just told her straight up. I said, "Miss Liddell, I would feel very comfortable right now if you just went ahead and terminated my contract, and I'll finish out my 30 days." I was like, "Because I'm not delivering you the customer service or the customer satisfaction that you need, and I feel extremely bad, and you don't owe me anything. I'll get over there and fix it. But if you would just go ahead and try to find somebody else to take care of it, because I don't think I'm ever going to be able to satisfy you at this point because you've got
Mm.
such a bad taste in your mouth with me."
Yeah.
And her exact response was, "Well, if it was that easy, I would. But it's a 6-month process to fire you, and I don't want to have to deal with it. Just fix the crap, please." And so I was like, "Okay." And then the next day, we had a conversation again, and I said, "I just want to let you know my mission is to be your favorite customer, is for me to be your favorite vendor." And she said, "Well, hopefully you can try to do that." And
She's not believing it. She's
and
not buying it.
fast forward 6 months later, we're texting about some stuff needing done, and because I try to stay in touch with her, and I normally don't deal with customers, my account managers do. But anytime there's a big fire, I try to stay involved a little bit with them to let them know that they got some, ownership involved. And she starts texting me about my past, and I'm like, so she's done research on me to find out that I'm a
Okay.
believer and follower of Jesus Christ, but then I have a past in addiction.
Mm.
And the next thing you know, we're relating our past of addiction, not her, but she had somebody else that she was very close to that had passed with addiction. And then now we've got this personal connection with that, and now we're best friends. And so,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like
Yeah.
you have those issues. It's all about how you handle them, and then it's developing that relationship so well that it will hurt them to have to fire you, and they're
Yeah.
going to communicate. So I mean, literally, like when she'll walk the campus, and she will send me a picture of a weed in a flower bed, and be like, "Hey, will you make sure this is taken care of?" And she knows that within 24 hours, it's going to be taken care of, if not sooner. And so,
Oof. That is amazing.
but
It.
when you only have 50 of those accounts, 100 of those accounts, it's so much easier
Yeah.
than the mainly residential lawn guys. I remember in the peer group I was last involved with, there was multiple people like, "My goal is to have 5,000 customers." I'm like, dude, I wouldn't want to have to deal with 5,000 customers. My life depended on it.
Well, and
And
they're really, to be fair, they're like this was Crossing the Chasm guy. What was his name? I forget his name, but he wrote the book Crossing the Chasm. He said there's like two types of businesses you can have. You can either have high touch, high price, or low touch, low price.
that's right.
And you're high touch, high price. Like, so you
That's
know
what I
her.
was.
You're
Yep.
like, hey, you call me at a beckons notice. I'll be there 4 hours, like within 4 hours, taking care of your problems. High price, high touch,
Yeah.
or low price, low touch. It's like, but you can't do both. You can't do something in between. Honestly, too many business owners try to do something in between. They're like, we want to be the white glove service, but we want to be the cheapest in town. And it's like, nope, you don't get to be both. Like,
Yeah.
you got to choose one or the other. And so you've said, hey, listen, my choice, and is to be high price, high touch. We're going to have great relationships with high level account managers who are going to be talented and charismatic and be able to like navigate those relationships. And I get to sell 4 contracts a year, and it's going to grow my business by $1 million that year or whatever. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be big numbers.
Yeah. And as we scale, it's been kind of a fearful thing on my end
Mm-hmm.
of like, can we deliver the customer service across the board that I expect? And it's going to be tough. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but Jeff Dominic, CEO of KeyServe, you remember him?
Yeah.
Me and him was talking one day, and he's telling me a story about how he had a customer in one of their branches had an issue, and he like literally caught a plane same day or the next day to go handle the situation with this account. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like that's just what it's going to take as we
Yeah.
grow and scale. And I'm actually trying to buy a plane, so hopefully that'll make that'll
This
make
is
that.
your pitch. This is your pitch. Is like, hey, it like, let me give you an example. Like, he's got a list of examples
Yeah,
of ways it's helped the one
here's
time in the
why we need
business.
a plane, baby.
Sweetheart, I
Budget
need a,
meeting. Here's why we need a plane in
yeah,
the first place.
exactly. We're gonna save literally thousands of dollars to.
Yeah.
Uh, all right. So you mentioned something earlier. You said, hey, I'm a man of faith. That's part of my story. I have this story of addiction as a part of my story. I know those are a big part. Like, that's played a part of the story. Tell me how those things have made your business better, how you've integrated those things into your business. Like, are you open about faith at work? Is like, how does that play a role? Because I do think, like, I think your story is probably more common than not, right? Like, hey, I'm a person who finally figured out how to get my life together because of my big personality, my big like way I approach life. It means I'm a pretty charismatic leader, and then faith became a part of my story. I probably heard that story at least 5 times or 6 times as I've met
Yeah.
other entrepreneurs. So talk about how that's currently involved in all of this and how that's played out and how you think about and approach that in your business.
Yeah. So I got saved in 2011. I grew up in the church and drug to church, all those things. And um, I, I'll never forget, I showed up to church hungover one morning to my mom. I was in high school. She looked over at me and she said, "Walk straight out the back door and don't speak to anybody. I can smell it on you." And anyways, I've been to church hungover, drunk, all those things, and so when God, took that away from me, whenever I surrendered my life to Him, my thing is, Lord, I want to do whatever I can to live for You, whatever that means, however I can
Mm.
do that. That's what I want to do, and give me whatever platform that is that I can use that in. And so fast forward, um, you know, I say fast forward, it started a week before I actually sobered up. But I was like, I'm going to just work and I'm going to do my thing with work. And I hired an employee and he happened to be a Christian. And so it was cool that me and him got to talk about Jesus early on in my life or my walk with the Lord. And then, God just kept putting people in my life and
So,
business.
by the way, your sobriety and your faith kind of those went together.
Yep. March 13th, I started my business. March 20th is whenever I sobered up, and March 22nd is whenever I surrendered my life to the Lord. So
Yeah.
all in a 9-day period. And so So fast forward, God just kept putting people in my life to help me grow and challenge me. And the business was just, a means of income. And then I met my wife, and then it was like, okay, well, I'm an uncollege educated dude, barely graduated high school. I want to get married to this, beautiful woman. And I guess I need to start growing this thing and
Yeah.
making a career out of it. And
Yeah.
so at that point, I only had one employee. And so then he would meet me at my house and we'd ride in the truck together all day. Um, and so, we just kept growing the business and the Lord just kept giving me opportunities and opportunities to, just kept putting people in my life to work for me that had a past with addiction.
Yeah.
Um, and in
And
26,
you have some guys in your current staff that have that same history.
that's right. And so in
Mm.
2015, he put two guys in my life specifically who I saw a gap in where they were at, where they were wanting to stay on the clean and straight path and be sober, but they didn't have a great place to go home to. And so I'm
Mm.
like, I've been praying for several months because I wasn't as involved with ministry at that time. Me and my wife just had a baby. And so it was kind of like taking a season off from serving in the church. So I've been praying for 6 months. So Lord, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? And he put it on me. He said, these guys need a safe place to go.
Yeah.
And so I came home to my wife that night. The Lord revealed it to me at Bible study. And I said, hey, baby, I said, God put it on my heart. We're going to open up a men's recovery residence.
So
She's like,
cool.
and she was laying in bed already. And she said, okay, cool. And I was like, no, you're supposed to be excited.
All right. All right.
Like,
Whatever.
she's like, whatever. And I'm like, no, for real. She said, pray about it. Get back with me in 30 days or whatever. Blew me off. And I'm like, you're supposed to support me. Like, I was like,
My wife, by the way, keeps me anchored that way too, where she'll be like,
yeah,
I'm like, sweetheart, I'm speaking in front of this group of like 50,000 people. She'll be like, oh, that's nice. And I'm like, what? Like, no,
yeah.
like this is massive.
And so fast forward 30 days later, I went to her. She's like, oh my gosh, I thought you forgot about it. I'm like, no, this is what the Lord told us to do. So she's like, all right. And she's the checks person. So she sits up in the bed and gets her notebook out. And she's like, what about this? What about this? And I'm like, I don't know.
Mm.
The Lord will provide that. We'll be all right. And so anyway, I founded our ministry shortly after that called Redeem Live.
We're just gonna go take it to the edge of chaos. We're just gonna like throw this
Right.
thing into the
Yeah.
world and build it while we fly it. And
Yeah. And so we opened up Redeem Living, which is men's recovery residences for guys when they get out of rehab. And so we help
very
place
cool.
them in jobs. Some of them do work for me, some of them don't. And so it's just been a really cool opportunity for me to share my faith and then also work with
Mm.
those in recovery. And then in our business, we've never shied away from sharing about our faith. Every single company meeting, I share the gospel in some form of fashion.
Yeah.
Anytime I have every bit of the company involved, once a month we do a company breakfast where we have somebody that works in the business do a devotional,
Mm-hmm.
and we share the gospel there, and
Have you
we
ever
put.
seen that have a negative consequence? I feel like I can't.
So
I feel like it's all upside
yeah,
in, or is there some downside to it?
no, because I mean every bit of our core values and everything that we do on the onboarding and everything, we communicate that on the front end, and
So
and
people
it's
who aren't comfortable with that, they're not going to come work for you.
they won't last more than a week or two.
Mm.
Correct. Now, the only time that it's ever been bad is you get those people who you have to fire because they just won't, be a part
Mm-hmm.
of the core values and the culture and all that. And it's probably been 3 or 4 over the years.
And
They
then the
go back to
next
that.
morning, you're sitting next to them in church, and you're going,
Yeah.
"Oh boy."
No, no, just the next morning after we let them go, then they're like, I thought you were a Christian, blah, 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 and then they start
Mm.
bashing you. And then, but I can honestly say that I think every one of them that I could think of off the top of my head has came to me later on is like, thank you for loving me the way you did and showing me what you showed me. Can I please have my job back? And so, so it's
Mm.
the only time it's ever been negative is whenever they want to try to throw it back up in your face when you've had to make the hard decision of firing them. And as Dan, as you know, that's something I don't take lightly as I've
Yeah.
had to have multiple conversations with you on it. And um, so yeah, I mean, but it's never, it's only positive. And the Lord
Mm-hmm.
has honored it so much. And I went to a point where one of my pastors said, I'm called to ministry. And so he's like, cool, let's start praying about what that is. And I thought that I was supposed to kind of scale back on my business and really focus on church ministry, and like my business just kept growing at that season, and I kept getting more opportunities to walk beside people, disciple people, and point them towards Christ, and it just hit me as like, this is my ministry. Like,
100%,
this is the path
100%.
the Lord has given me, and so that's
I felt like I've had more, like as a man of faith, I feel like I've had more opportunities to teach truth and to help people get on good paths doing what I do than I probably ever would have done if I put on a shirt and tie and became
that's right.
a pastor, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I feel like I've had a better platform for that. And it's weird, like even without being very direct about my faith with my clients, they'll come to me and they'll be like, hey, I'm going to give up drinking and go back to church. And I'm like, what? Like, we didn't really talk about that. But the consequence of up leveling your life, just
Yeah.
if when you, and it's a requirement of a leader to up level your life. Like you just can't make it in the game of leadership without actually up leveling who you are as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And when we teach that, there's a spiritual component to that. There's a physical, oftentimes they get healthier, right? They start CrossFit or whatever. There's an intellectual component to that. They start reading, they start listening to podcasts instead of sports radio. Thank you to our tens of listeners who are making that choice. It's like all of those things start to click for those who make it.
Yeah.
Right. They start to click for those who make it. And faith is a part of that. And so absolutely our work can be our ministry,
Mm-hmm.
and in some ways a more powerful one. And not to mention that you have the resources now to do men's recovery centers. And so we not only need our mantra is helping others do more good in the world. It's like we need time and resources to go do that. And the resource part, it's probably easier for your pastor to find people who have time on their hands than for your pastor to find people who have money on their hands.
That's
You know
right.
what I'm saying?
And that's what we try to do as well, is just giving back as much as we can in all the different ways, with whether it's going and cutting somebody's yard at the church, whether it's donating time, money, whatever it may be. And so that's definitely what we do. And so
Yeah, there's a lot of good that can come of that. Out of curiosity, your recovery center is a nonprofit, I guess.
it is. Yep, it's a
If
501c3
in
nonprofit.
case one of our tens of listeners wanted to like chip in
Yeah.
and they were excited about that, how would they figure out about that?
Redeemedliving.info. Redeemed.
Redeemedliving.info, or you can just email info@ceocoach.biz.
Yeah.
And we'll get you connected to Brent if you're curious about how to do that. Or if you wanted to start something similar in your locale, you're like, dude, that would be awesome. Man,
yeah, we're dropping the bucket of what needs to happen. And so we're the number one missing component in the recovery world is what we do. And that's long-term care, aftercare. Everybody can get involved into it or go to an inpatient rehab.
Yeah.
But it's teaching them how to live life once they get out of there, and then helping them get back on their feet. We've seen guys, all of a sudden get vehicles, driver's license, get their kids back, get their marriage back, different things that it's so hard for them to get ahead as they, go back out into the real world as soon as they get out of rehab, living on their own, those kind of things. And so bank accounts, like it blows my mind how many of these men come here and never have had a bank account, just coaching them through that step. Seen them get married, buy houses, all kinds of stuff.
And at the end of the day, as much as making a commercial property look pretty, there's nothing, right? And that's your purpose, right? When we talk about,
we change the life.
Share your company purpose. And I want to talk about that for a few minutes because I love your company's purpose and the way that lives out in literally how you operate, how you run your business.
Yeah, so our original vision statement, purpose statement was, to become Southeast premier pool landscape company, changing the culture of the green industry, not only in our target communities, but also in the lives of those who work with us financially and spiritually. And that was kind of like a long vision statement of like,
I'm impressed you have it memorized, man. I'm impressed.
Overall, we want to change the culture of the industry, but financially impact and spiritually impact the people's lives that we work with or that work with us. And so Dan was like, dude, this is a mouthful. We need to simplify this thing. What are we doing here? Like, what if we see success? What are we doing here? And what does that look like? And so we just started telling stories of what success looked like for us, and we came up with the tagline, "We change lives," and that's what we do, and that's our mission is as we build our business and grow our commercial accounts and sell more Christmas lighting accounts and all that, the sole purpose in that is so that we can change more lives. And so that's what our focus is we change lives. So whatever that is, if that's helping a guy get, his finances in line to get a car or get his driver's license back or restore his marriage or even females too, whatever that is, that's our purpose. And so, and we want
Mm-hmm.
the financial means to be able to do so. And so as we grow the business, we're only going to be able to make a bigger difference in that realm as well.
Yeah. And when I hear that, my test for purpose statements is always, would I be willing to sacrifice a portion of my life to help with that? Like, would I be bought in to say, sign me up, coach? Like, that is a worthy cause, like, to go spend my life on. If we put that on Brent's headstone and it said, here lies Brent Moore, the most interesting man in the world who changed lives.
Yeah.
Right? You'd be like, I'm okay with that. That's a great like
Yeah.
statement on my headstone. I lived a great life if I can do that. And that's really like it creates like I don't even know, how would you describe like what that, it almost like brings the soul to the business.
Yeah. I mean, it creates this culture of it's not about one person. It's not about
Mm,
the one thing. It's about more than that. And it's about, more people's lives. And so we did this about 6 months ago in one of our quarterly meetings. Um, and I said, I just want to raise the hands. How many of you are in recovery in this room?
mm,
Like have a where you are actively trying to stay sober or sober up of from some drug or alcohol. And it blew my mind that more than 50% of the people raised their hand when I
yeah.
only knew of about 25% of the people in the room.
Yeah.
But if I would ask that
And,
question on the
and
day
and
that
by
I
the
was
way, I don't know that that's unique to you because you have had the recovery stuff. I don't think that's unique. I'd be really curious
correct.
to do that across this industry.
Yeah.
We probably find that there's a fair bit that are currently struggling. There's a fair bit that are just out of or just recovered. Yeah, that's fascinating.
And so, but what we've seen is a lot of these guys they wouldn't even admit that or even realize it,
Mm-hmm.
and so when a guy leaves us, we want them, their life to be better.
Mm.
And I asked that question the other day at our leadership or at our quarterly meeting 2 weeks ago. I said, so I just want to ask one question: can anybody who can honestly say their life has gotten better since they've been working here? I just want you to raise your hand. Not anything that we've done, but just since the day you started working here, if you feel that your life has gotten better, I want you to raise your hand. And everybody besides one person raised their hand. It was only because he'd only been there a week.
Oh, I was like,
And so and I was like sad that he didn't raise his hand still,
yeah,
but but so it was cool to see that, but then also to make them realize that, it's nothing that I'm doing or nothing that I've done necessarily that that's the cause of that. I think that obviously that I play a part in it, and our business does, but it's making them realize that. My wife
yeah.
has the most powerful ability to do that with me. Is like when I want to throw my sucker in the dirt and have a bad day, she quickly would go, hold on. A, you
Mm.
prayed for this. B, think about this.
That's the
You know,
worst line. You
it was,
prayed for it, dude. Like
I
you
know.
prayed for it. Yeah,
And so,
so great.
just to be able to make somebody realize it
Yeah.
is a big thing. And so,
There's an old saying that says, "He who has a why to live can survive almost anyhow."
yeah,
And I think at the end of the, especially for some of our key players, our key leaders, I think about your Tommies of the world. I'm just imagining how his heart was lifted when he saw those hands go up, and
yeah,
know that all the sacrifice and all the hurricane seasons he's been through and hard times, right? Like tough weeks, long weeks. And when we feel that why surge through us, man, it just recharges the batteries and makes us go, yeah, it's worth it. It's worth the sacrifice is worth.
mm,
The effort is worth the reward. And by the way, if we don't have moments like that, we don't have moments where we somehow alert and let people know that we're winning and that this is worth the sacrifice. I mean, that's where burnout starts to happen and people get annoyed and frustrated. It's also, by the way, when people feel undervalued, it's when they ask for raises because they're like, dude, I'm not making enough money to go through all this shit. Right? Like they're frustrated by all of that. And so at the end of the day, I think the purpose, one, anchors you as a leader to say, this is what we're about, but it also just kind of gives this little charge through the organization that makes everything a little bit gain context. Cause it's all about perspective. It's like the context is, no, this really does matter. I know that you just went and edged today, or you just went and did something that seems kind of mundane, but it matters.
That's right.
Love it. Love it. All right, Brent, one question we always ask our guests before we wrap up here is just give us some wisdom. Final thought from Brent Moore on if you're talking to guys who are on the path to be where you are, or who peers standing side by side with you, you go, man, I think I figured a few things out that have made me the success that I am. What would your final thought be as far as like, hey, stick with it, guys. We're going to get there.
Yeah. So I have a life mentor, for lack of better words. It's just an awesome godly dude that I trust, with anything. And he's my chiropractor. And we just talk all the time. We work out together and stuff. And, but he told me one day, he said, cause I'll go in there and complain about my health or complain about work or family, whatever it may be. And he always tells me, he says, look, he said, you have to get it in order. And this is the order. It's God, family, health, and then your business. And he said, when those get out of order, that's whenever things will start to build up. They start to get, out of place and all that. And so he said, there's going to be seasons, there's going to be weeks, there might even be a couple months where a couple of those things might get flipped. When you have something big going on at work, it might take you away from your family a little bit. So it's okay. Or it might take you out of the gym as much as you need to be in the gym, but you got to get right back on the path. And so, I can honestly say that as long as I keep those in order, it keeps me going pretty well. And, because we can find all the answers to life in the good book of the Holy Bible. And, so we could find every bit of answers in that. And then when you have your family, in line and in check, it's only going to make everything else in your life so much better. And so whenever things aren't good on the home front for me, and we've went through seasons.
And it's so true with the family thing. Cause I'm like, we should get your wife on a podcast to give the shadow version of this success story, because like you and I both know, right? It's like the old saying was like, behind every successful man is an even more talented woman. Right. And it's like, that relationship being strong is more than half the story, maybe.
That's right.
And what she's contributed to all this, and shout out to her if she listens. Like, we get it. Like, we know where the power is really coming from. And so, yeah, so true.
So like when my home front's in line and in check, it makes everything else in my life fall into suit much better, with my health, and with the business and even with my relationship with the Lord. And so when that gets out of line, it affects my relationship with the Lord, but it also affects my health. It affects my career. And then when my health's out of line, it affects how good I feel in the mornings to be able to get up, serve my family, and get in the Word and, spend time with the Lord, because I feel like crap because I've been eating terrible and I haven't been exercising. And so then now all those things get out of line, and then it affects my business. And so it's like every single one of them affects the other one so much that you have to keep all four of them in check. Try to keep them in order as much as possible.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do have to get out of order, but you have to keep them in check.
Yeah. And let me just suggest this idea. So I had somebody who said, I don't necessarily believe in work-life balance, but I do believe in work-life harmony. Yeah. And I love that idea, where it's like, there are some periods of time that my work life is unbalanced with my family life.
Yeah.
But there are things that I keep them in the correct priority order, meaning that I recognize that even when my work is taking more of my time, my family is still my priority.
Yep.
And that allows it to be in harmony. And so, for example, I travel a lot. I'm out of town a lot. But the way that harmonizes in my life is that I also work from home.
Yeah.
And so when I am here, I'm here, and they feel like I'm around a lot, even though I travel a bunch. And so it harmonizes. And it's like, I found a good harmony there. With faith, for example, it's like, yeah, there's some Sundays that I'm traveling or whatever, but I've found ways to harmonize and compensate and still show that that's my priority. And so it's just finding that work-life harmony, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like my son last night, we're on our way to baseball practice. He has baseball practice at 4:30. I try to get there early because I always want my kids to be taught to be early. But then also, so he and I can throw in an outfield together before practice starts, and so I have to leave the office at 3:45. So we're on the way to the ball field last night, and he's like, "Why do you always have to talk on the phone?" Like just a genuine. I mean, it was a genuine genuine question.
Yeah, curious.
I was like, he's like, "Are you still working?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm still working." He said, "Oh," and I said, "Daddy's blessed and lucky to be able to work from anywhere in the world, essentially, but I'm able to take off work early to come to your baseball practice. So I do have to answer the phone and make a couple end of the day phone calls on the way to your practice, so that when I get to your practice, I'm all yours."
Yeah.
So like him, trying to explain that to my kids of like, when we go out of town during the week, when we go to, like, we love Braves baseball, so we went to a Braves baseball game at Tonga. I had to work the whole way there, and it's like, but I got to go. I was able to financially afford to take you to the game, but I was able to go during the week, to take you to a baseball game, and so it's the harmony. But then when we go on vacation, I'm very intentional with. I get up early. I go in there in the other room and work till 6:30, 7 o'clock, and then when the family gets up, I shut work off, and we vacate together. And sometimes I don't even get up and do work in the morning.
Yeah. It is that kind of work-life harmony. And by the way, I think it's great for our families to model being a baller and to say, hey, we do big things in the world, and we start recovery centers, and we grow $1 million companies. I think, especially for, like, I think it's true of our sons and daughters, like, don't underestimate the value of our impact in the world that to the benefit of the family. My kids know the standard for the Ralph's family is we do cool things. My kids watch me recording podcasts, and guess what? That creates in their mind a level set of what I can expect to go do in my life. And it's probably one of the most powerful things we can offer our children is a model of what a great life looks like.
Yeah.
And so they all go together. You're right. Like it's all, one is affecting the other. And as long as we, in my mind, prioritize those correctly. And by the way, we can't prioritize if we don't spend time on them. Let's be clear. Like, you can't just be like, yeah, that's my priority, but never spend time there. Yeah. But we can find a harmony that really works. Love that. Brent, I could talk to you, and probably we should talk for the next 8 years. Let's just we'll record the first ever 8-year long podcast is what what I want to do.
Annual event.
An annual event. Well, hey, Brent, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Just such an honor to work with you, work with your team. I'll flatter you a little bit on TV. You're one of the top leaders that I get to have had a chance to meet and work with and interact with. And I think it is because you put it in order, and that makes a huge difference. I do think it is because you found the sweet spot between chaos and structure. And I think because you live in that space, I think it is because you love people so effectively. And that results in this beautiful loyalty and connection with them, and because of that purpose of changing lives. So congratulations, honored to know you. And thanks for being with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us on the Lawn Care CEO podcast. Go do like Brent Moore, go do more good.